Ada Blackjack, known as Ada Blackjack, was born in 1898 in Spruce Creek, a remote settlement near the city of Nome in Alaska. She was Inuit by birth, yet she didn't learn the hunter-gatherer ways of her people. Instead, she was raised by Methodist missionaries. Growing up, she was taught English, studied the Bible, and learnt skills that were considered essential for young women at the time, such as housekeeping, sewing, and cooking. When Ada was 16 years old, she married a local dog musher called Jack Blackjack. The couple had 3 children together, but only one survived past infancy. Years later, in 1921, the family were exploring the Seward Peninsula. All seemed fine, but then, while his family weren't looking, Jack quickly made his way to his sledge and commanded his sled dogs to leave. He abandoned his wife and son in one of the world's most inhospitable places. Ada Blackjack had no other choice than to start walking. As her son, called Bennett, was only 5 years old, when he got tired, Ada would have to carry him. Eventually, they made it back to Nome after trekking around 40 miles. The young boy was described as weak and ill, probably because he suffered from tuberculosis. As Ada Blackjack's husband had left her, she was now destitute and simply didn't have the resources to look after her son. With no other choice, she temporarily placed Bennett in a local orphanage. Greatly upset by this, she promised herself that she would work hard and earn enough money to bring him home. That same year, an Icelandic American called Vilhjálmur Stephenson had organized and financed an expedition to Wrangel Island, north of Serbia. Stephenson was a seasoned Arctic explorer, so he had little trouble finding men for his expedition to colonize the island. He assembled a 4-man team, led by the 20-year-old Alan Crawford. The other 3 men were Lorne Knight, Frederick Mora, both 28, and Milton Gale, who was just 19. Initially, Stephenson wanted to claim Wrangel Island for Canada. However, the government refused to assist with the expedition. In light of this, he went to Britain, but again, its government showed little interest in colonizing the remote island. Despite this setback, the expedition went ahead. While the men were in the city of Nome, Blackjack got word that they were looking for an English-speaking seamstress native to Alaska. After speaking with the 4 men, things seemed promising, so she agreed to join them. She was assured that during her 1-year contract sewing survival gear, she would be well fed and taken care of. They also told her that she didn't have to worry about the grueling day-to-day work of Arctic survival. This was a great relief, as she was terrified of encountering a polar bear. Strangely, the man behind this whole operation, Stephenson, had no intention of joining the party. He had already spent years exploring the Arctic, so he left the mission down to his hand-picked team. It's said that one of the motives behind the colonization of Wrangel Island was because Stephenson had hoped to begin an exploration company which would tour wealthy individuals around the various Arctic islands. But the main reason was to increase his fame as an explorer and to try and exploit the land's resources. The men had planned for various Alaskan natives to join them with the expedition, yet they wisely backed out. This made Blackjack doubt whether she should go on an expedition with 4 men who she hardly knew. However, she was certain that if she stayed in Nome, doing odd jobs of sewing and housekeeping, she would never earn enough to cure her son's illness. For the 1-year expedition, she was to receive a $50 a month salary. This is around $700 in today's money, but to Blackjack, it was a huge sum of money which she couldn't turn down. So, on the 9th of September 1921, the scared, shy, 23-year-old left for Wrangel Island on the ship Silver Wave with her fellow explorers and a cat called Victoria. After a week at sea, on the 16th of September, the crew finally made it to Wrangel Island. Upon arrival, they planted Britain's Union flag in the soil, just as Stephenson had instructed them, despite Wrangel Island being claimed as a Russian territory. Stephenson's team was ill-equipped and quite inexperienced. Their sled dogs were weak from the journey, and as they were setting up camp, they realized that much of the food they had brought with them had spoiled. Despite this, they remained positive, as Stephenson assured them that the island had ample game, so they would have more than enough to eat. Blackjack soon discovered that the island was crawling with polar bears. This fear, along with her homesickness, made her develop the condition Arctic hysteria. During her first months there, Blackjack was very emotional and had developed strong feelings for Crawford, which only made things on the island more difficult. She frequently ran away from camp, leaving the men to cook for themselves. Although this wasn't a huge issue, they needed her to sew warm clothes or else they would freeze during winter. To cover more hunting ground, the men spread out their tents across the island. This also helped to keep Blackjack away from Crawford. Despite this, on many occasions she walked 15 miles to Crawford's camp, only to be dragged screaming back by night. As winter came, the days were extremely cold and dark. The temperatures averaged around -30 degrees Celsius, and because of the long polar night, the sun never rose over the horizon. There was nothing to hunt, and so the men spent most of the day in their tents. Blackjack's behaviour was a problem for the expedition. The men regretted bringing her and needed her to change her behaviour, so they told her if she didn't do her job, she would be forced to sleep outside. After this, she changed. Her hysteria subsided and she began to work extremely efficiently. Fortunately, once the summer months rolled around, the island had plenty of wildlife, just like Stephenson had promised. However, summer wouldn't last forever. The party were anxious for a ship to arrive, but sadly, no one came to save them. Unfortunately, the schooner Teddy Bear, that was meant to pick the group up, became stuck in the ice. The captain, Joel Bernard, realized there was no way the vessel could penetrate the ice, so he was forced to turn back, leaving the group to survive another year. As ice started to surround the island, their hopes for an arrival of a ship were extinguished. Their only option was to prepare for winter. As September came to an end, the wildlife started to disappear. The party's food was quickly running out. There was no way that their stores would get them through the winter, and it wasn't long until they began to starve. By January 1923, the situation was dire. Not only was the party starving, but the 28-year-old American Knight was extremely ill. He showed symptoms of having scurvy, and his condition was only getting worse. With their stores empty and hunting proving ineffective, the group decided that they couldn't stay put. So, on the 29th of January, Crawford, Mora and Gale decided to set out in search of help. They hoped to cross a 700-mile frozen Chukchi Sea. Meanwhile, Blackjack was to care for Knight. Crawford, Mora and Gale were never seen again. The hardships they encountered while mushing for miles on end can only be left to the imagination. It remains a mystery how or when they died, or if the party even made it to Siberia. Blackjack was now alone with bedbound Knight and the cat Vic. She did her best to care for him, acting as a nurse, companion, and servant at the same time. Yet, she still had to provide food for herself and Knight, meaning she was also serving as a huntswoman and cook. By March, she drastically improved her survival skills, creating a successful method to lure white foxes and trap them. Sadly, Knight would frequently mistreat Blackjack, shouting at her due to his helpless condition. Even though she did everything in her power to ease his pain in his final months of life, he never seemed grateful. Instead, he would constantly criticize her for not taking better care of him. The harsh words hurled at Blackjack made her cry in her tent for days, but she remained strong and quickly got back to hunting. In her diary, she wrote about the hardships she endured while caring for him, stating, "He never stopped to think how hard it is for a woman to take 4 men's places, to woodwork, to hunt something for him to eat, to do his bed, and to take the shit out for him." Blackjack soon overcame her fears, learning to shoot rifles and hunt polar bears. At the entrance of her tent, she stacked boxes on top of each other, creating a makeshift cupboard to store ammunition, binoculars, and other essential survival tools. She also built a gun rack above her bed, so she would be armed if she was ever endangered by polar bears venturing too close to the camp. Moreover, she erected a raised platform, allowing her to spot and shoot polar bears from a distance. After 6 months of looking overnight, he finally passed away. Blackjack recorded his death on Gale's typewriter. The document read, "The date of Mr. Knight's death. He died on June 23rd. I don't know what time he died though. Anyway, I write the date, just to let Mr. Stephenson know what month he died and what day of the month. Written by Mrs. Ada B. Jack." Following this, Blackjack left Knight's corpse resting on his bed and zipped up his sleeping bag. One would think that Blackjack would later bury him, but she didn't. Instead, she piled up boxes, creating a barrier so that his body was out of reach and protected from wild animals. Blackjack couldn't bear to bury the body of her former companion. Mentally, she wasn't able to bring herself to do it. To avoid the smell of Knight's decomposing body, she moved into the storage tent. Afterwards, she used wood to support the tent's structural integrity, strengthening the damaged walls and ceiling. Despite being alone, with no idea if anyone was going to come for her, it would have been very easy to fall into despair. Yet Blackjack stayed strong, doing all she could to survive. Every day in her diary, she thanked God. She was determined to be reunited with her son and raise him. It seemed that this is what kept her going. When Blackjack wasn't constructing, hunting, or doing basic survival activities, she sometimes took pictures of the camp. Fortunately, the expedition came with photography equipment, allowing her to experiment. She even captured photographs of herself outside the tent. Finally, on the 10th of August 1923, after almost 2 years on Wrangel Island, she was rescued by a former colleague of Stephenson's called Harold Noyce. She strode out to meet her rescuers with a relieved smile, wearing a reindeer parka that she had stitched herself. The crew of the rescue boat noted that Blackjack had mastered her environment, so far that it seems likely she could have lived there another year, although the isolation would have been a dreadful experience. Finally, after so long isolated from the rest of the world, she would be able to see her son. News of her incredible story and the expedition's tragic end quickly spread throughout Canada and the States. Because of this, Blackjack started to receive unwanted media attention. She was a quiet, shy seamstress who tried to avoid the articles and titles written about her. Some newspapers even called her a real female Robinson Crusoe, as she was the sole survivor of the expedition, apart from Vic, of course. In the end, Blackjack was reunited with her son Bennett once she arrived in Nome. She also received payment for her 2 years on the island, although it was less than the $50 monthly salary which she had been promised. Using this money and what she had made by selling furs from the expedition, she managed to take Bennett out of the orphanage and bring him home with her. Blackjack later took Bennett to a hospital in Seattle, settling there for a while in order to treat his tuberculosis. Despite his condition improving, it seems his health problems were an issue for much of his life. Blackjack went on to remarry and had another son called Billy. She then left Seattle and returned to Alaska. Unfortunately, Blackjack's later life was riddled with sadness and poverty. Not only did she not receive a penny from the subsequent publication of several books and articles about the disastrous expedition, but a series of smear campaigns had a negative impact on her reputation, claiming she had cold-heartedly refused to care for Knight. Meanwhile, those who lied about her, namely Stephenson and Noyce, tried to make as much money as possible out of the story. As the man responsible for this tragedy, Stephenson's reputation was severely tainted by this disaster. He became hated by the public for having sent inexperienced young men to Wrangel Island. Blackjack's son, Bennett, passed away in 1975 at the age of 58 after suffering from a stroke. Ada Blackjack died on the 29th of May 1983 in the Pioneer home in Palmer, Alaska, aged 85. She was buried by Bennett's side. Thank you everyone for watching this video. If you're new to the channel, subscribe please. If you like the video, please leave me a like and a comment down below. And if you don't have notifications, it'd be great if you guys turn them on. Anyway, that's all from me. So I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Lives. Thanks.